Hello, I'm Roger from Stories Podcast. Hollow Pines, a long horror story. Section 1, The Arrival. The sun dipped behind the towering pines as Clara and her friends pulled off the narrow, gravel road into the small town of Hollow Pines. The air smelled like damp earth and pine needles, and an uneasy silence hung in the heavy twilight. Clara glanced at the GPS, which blinked. "No signal," she sighed. "Figures. Out here, no one gets service." Her friend Mike chuckled from the passenger seat. "Welcome to the middle of nowhere. Just how we planned our camping trip, huh?" Clara wasn't so sure anymore. They'd been excited for weeks, escaping the city, no distractions, just nature. But the silence felt too deep, the shadows too thick. Something about Hollow Pines made her skin crawl. The town was small. A single gas station, a general store with peeling paint, and an old motel with a flickering neon sign. "Welcome to Hollow Pines. Rest and relax." The motel looked deserted, but their reservation was confirmed by the clerk at the gas station, a stoic man with sunken eyes and a scar running down one cheek. "We'll be at cabin 7, Clara said, gripping the crumpled paper. The clerk nodded but said nothing else. Night was closing in fast as they carried their gear up the rough path toward the cabin. The wooden door creaked ominously when Mike pushed it open. Inside, the cabin was rustic but clean. A fireplace stood cold, and an old clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. "Cozy," Mike said, dropping his pack. "Let's light a fire." Clara moved to the window and looked out. The wood seemed to press against the glass, dark and endless. Suddenly, a chill swept through the room. The others noticed it too. "Did you hear that?" whispered Sarah, their third friend, eyes wide. "What?" Mike asked, but his voice was tight. A faint rustling came from outside. The trees whispered secrets, and Clara felt as if unseen eyes were watching. "We're probably just animals." She tried to reassure them, but her heart pounded. As night fell fully, the cabin's shadows seemed to grow heavier, almost alive. Clara sat by the fireplace, trying to ignore the noises that came with darkness. Twigs snapping, low groans, and a distant, chilling laughter that seemed to ride the wind. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. "Power's out," Mike said, fumbling for his flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, but something moved in the corner of the room. Clara gasped. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Mike shone the light again. Nothing, but a cold breath brushed against her neck. "Let's stick together," Sarah urged. They huddled by the fire, which Mike struggled to light with wet wood. Outside, the laughter came again, closer this time, filled with malice. Clara's eyes darted to the window. Something was watching. Section 2, The Shadow in the Woods. The fire sputtered and finally caught, casting flickering light over the cabin's walls. The warm glow did little to chase away the chill that had settled deep in Clara's bones. She stared into the flames, trying to calm the rising panic. "Maybe it's just some prank," Mike said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Like local kids trying to scare us." Sarah shook her head, hugging her knees. "No one lives out here for miles, Mike. It's just woods and ghosts, if you believe the stories." Clara forced a laugh, but it came out hollow. "Ghosts aren't real." The three sat silently for a moment, the crackling fire the only sound. Then, a sharp knock echoed through the cabin. 3 short, deliberate taps on the wooden door. Clara jumped. Mike grabbed a poker from the hearth, standing in front of the door. "Who's there?" he called, voice steady but tense. No answer. The knocking came again, softer this time, like fingernails scraping lightly. Sarah gasped. "I'm going to check outside," Mike said, stepping toward the door. "No." "Wait," Clara said, grabbing his arm. It could be someone dangerous. Mike pulled free, his face hard. We need to know if we're alone out here. With trembling hands, he unlocked the door and stepped outside. The cold night air hit Clara's face instantly. The trees swayed gently, but there was no sign of anyone. Mike's flashlight beam swept over the thick underbrush. Nothing. No footprints, no shadows, just the quiet forest. He closed the door and locked it again, breathing heavily. Maybe it was an animal, he suggested, though his eyes darted nervously. An animal that knocks on doors? Sarah scoffed. Suddenly, a low moan floated through the trees. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something in between, a sound of pain and rage. Okay, I don't like this anymore, Clara admitted, moving closer to the fireplace. Maybe we should call it a night. They settled into uneasy silence, but Clara's mind raced. She'd heard stories about Hollow Pines, how the town disappeared from maps decades ago after strange disappearances and eerie phenomena. Some said the forest itself was alive, feeding on those who dared enter. As the night deepened, the temperature dropped sharply. Clara rubbed her arms, eyes flicking to the window again. Between the trees, she thought she saw a figure, tall, shadowy, standing perfectly still. Guys? She whispered. Mike and Sarah turned, eyes wide. There! Clara pointed. The flashlight beam sliced through the darkness, but the figure vanished like smoke. Did you see it? Sarah whispered. Clara nodded. A sudden pounding at the back door shattered the silence. This time, it was frantic, desperate. Someone's out there, Mike said, voice barely above a whisper. They moved as one, grabbing whatever they could use as weapons. Clara's heart thundered in her chest as the pounding grew louder, more urgent. And then it stopped. The cabin W. Section 3. The Stranger's Plea. The voice outside was thin, desperate, barely more than a whisper carried by the wind. Clara pressed her ear to the door, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. Let me in, please, the voice repeated, frail and shaky. Mike stepped forward, his makeshift weapon clenched tightly. Who's out there? Show yourself. His voice was firmer now, but the tremor betrayed his fear. Silence. Then a faint rustling sound, like dry leaves shifting. The voice spoke again, barely audible. I'm lost. Please, I won't hurt you. Sarah swallowed hard, stepping closer to Clara. Do you think it's real? Or something else? Clara's mind screamed at her to ignore it, but the voice sounded human, broken, scared. Maybe it's someone hurt, she said, voice trembling. Mike hesitated, then reached for the door handle. No. Clara grabbed his arm. We don't know what's out there. The voice was suddenly louder, more urgent. Please, I'm freezing. Just let me in for a moment. Mike's hand hovered over the latch. If it's a trick, we're done for. Suddenly, a loud bang shook the door. Wood splintered beneath Mike's hand as something slammed against it. The friend screamed and scrambled away. The pounding grew more violent, like a battering ram trying to break through. Get to the window, Sarah shouted. We need to see who, or what, it is. They edged to the dusty window and peered out, shining the flashlight into the thick darkness. Nothing. No figure. No shadow. Just the black trees, swaying in the cold wind. Where did it go? Mike whispered. Suddenly, from the corner of the porch, a pale hand appeared, trembling and claw-like. A figure stepped slowly into the flashlight beam, tall, gaunt, face pale and sunken, eyes wide with terror. It's a man, Clara breathed. The man looked exhausted, his clothes torn and dirty, lips cracked and blue. Please, I need help, he said hoarsely. The woods, They're alive. They won't let me leave. Sarah backed away, shivering. This is bad, Clara. We should call the police. Clara shook her head. We don't have service. The man's eyes darted nervously to the trees behind him. They're watching, waiting. You shouldn't have come here. Mike gritted his teeth. What do you mean? What's watching us? The man's gaze flickered toward the forest. The pines, they remember. They hungered. A cold wind blew, rattling the cabin windows. The fire sputtered, casting grotesque shadows. Suddenly, the man dropped to his knees, clutching his head. No, not here, not now. He screamed, a sound of pure agony, before collapsing against the door. The friend stared, frozen in terror. What is happening? Sarah whispered. The man lay still, but his lips moved in a silent prayer. From deep in the woods, a low, guttural growl echoed, closer than before. Something was coming. Section 4. The Curse of the Pines. The stranger's body sagged against the door, motionless now, but the terror in his eyes lingered like a stain on the night. Clara glanced at Mike and Sarah. The three of them exchanged worried looks, unsure whether to help or barricade themselves inside. Should we let him in? Sarah whispered, voice barely audible. Mike shook his head. We can't take the risk. Clara bit her lip, heart pounding. Maybe if we at least bring him inside. He looks like he's about to freeze out here. Reluctantly, Mike unlocked the door and swung it open just wide enough to pull the man inside. His clothes smelled of damp earth and decay. The cabin felt smaller suddenly, as if the shadows had thickened with the man's arrival. Here, Clara said, pulling an old blanket from the couch. She wrapped it around him. The man shivered violently. His lips blew and cracked. Thank you, he rasped. My name is Elias. Elias, Clara repeated, kneeling beside him. What happened to you? Elias coughed harshly, his eyes darting nervously toward the windows. I came here to find the truth. Hollow Pines, it's cursed. The forest takes what it wants. Sarah frowned. What do you mean? It's just a forest. Elias shook his head, voice hoarse but urgent. No. The pines are alive, ancient and hungry. They remember those who wronged them. They trap people inside, twist their minds, and feed on their fear. Mike scoffed. Sounds like a ghost story. Maybe, Elias said, but it's real. My friends, they didn't make it out. The woods don't just trap you physically, they consume your soul. A chill swept through the cabin. The fire flickered wildly, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward them. Why are you here then? Clara asked, heart pounding. Elias's eyes met hers, haunted and desperate. Because the pines sent me back. They need someone else now. A sudden scratching noise came from the back door. Slow, deliberate, like nails scraping wood. We should leave, Sarah whispered, trembling. Mike grabbed a flashlight and moved toward the door, but Clara stopped him. No, she said. If the forest wants us, maybe we need to understand it, or it will keep taking people. Elias nodded weakly. There's an old legend, a way to break the curse, but it's dangerous. You have to face the heart of the pines. Where's that? Clara asked. Elias's lips curled into a bitter smile. Deeper in the forest, past the twisted creek, where the trees bleed. Clara swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the night pressing in. The forest outside was no longer just a backdrop. It was a living nightmare. And now, it was coming for them. Section 5. Into the darkness. The fire's glow flickered as the room grew colder. Clara sat close to Elias, watching the faint rise and fall of his chest. The words he spoke still echoed in her mind. The trees bleed, the heart of the pines. It was more than a legend. It was a warning. Mike paced near the window, flashlight in hand, his face pale. If this is some kind of trap, we're walking right into it. Sarah pulled her jacket tighter, eyes darting nervously toward the woods. And what if it's true? What if there really is something in those trees? Clara stood and walked to the door, glancing back once at the stranger lying weakly on the floor. We need to prepare. We can't wait here. The three of them gathered their gear, packing flashlights, knives, and ropes. Outside, the forest loomed like a wall of shadows, the moonlight barely penetrating the thick canopy. As they stepped onto the porch, a low whisper drifted on the wind. Faint voices, calling their names, twisting and echoing. Mike shivered. This is insane! Clara tightened her grip on the flashlight. We have to find the heart of the pines before it finds us. The path was narrow, overgrown with thorny bushes and creeping vines that seemed to clutch at their legs. Every step deeper into the forest thickened the air with an oppressive weight, as if unseen eyes watched from every shadow. Look, Sarah whispered, pointing ahead. There, in the pale moonlight, the trees grew twisted and gnarled, their bark dark and slick, like they had been bleeding sap that stained the ground beneath. The creek Elias spoke of glistened nearby, its waters black and still, reflecting the distorted branches above. Mike hesitated. Are we really going to cross that? Clara nodded, swallowing her fear. We don't have a choice. As they stepped over the creek, Clara's flashlight flickered, and for a moment, the wood seemed to pulse, alive, breathing. From the darkness came a low growl. The sound was deep, ancient, and filled with rage. Run! Sarah screamed. They sprinted through the trees, branches slashing at their faces, roots threatening to trip them. Behind them, something moved, a hulking shadow, relentless and silent. Breath ragged, Clara stumbled into a small clearing. At its center stood a massive tree, its bark cracked and bleeding a dark, viscous liquid. The air was thick with the scent of decay and something far worse. This must be it, Clara whispered, heart pounding. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and the shadows around them thickened into writhing shapes. The pines don't want us here, Elias's voice echoed in her mind. But you have to face it, or never leave. The darkness closed in. Section 6. The Bleeding Tree. Clara's breath hitched as she stared at the massive tree in the clearing. Its bark cracked open, oozing thick black sap that dripped slowly onto the earth below. The ground was stained dark, and a faint pulsing vibration seemed to rise from the roots themselves. Mike and Sarah joined her, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and dread. This is the heart? Mike asked, voice barely steady. Elias, who had somehow followed them, leaned weakly against a nearby rock. Yes, the source of the pine's curse. It's alive, a wound that won't heal. Clara knelt, touching the sticky sap. It was cold and strangely warm at the same time, like it pulsed with a heartbeat. She pulled back quickly, a sick feeling settling in her stomach. Suddenly, a whisper slithered through the clearing. At first soft, then growing louder, a chorus of voices speaking in broken, tortured tones. Leave! 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 Sarah grabbed Clara's arm, shaking. We shouldn't be here. We have to, Clara said firmly. Elias said this is the only way to stop it. Elias nodded grimly. There's a ritual. You must make a sacrifice. Give the pine something to take so it will let you go. Mike swallowed hard. What kind of sacrifice? Elias's eyes darkened. Blood. Fear. Life. The shadows around the clearing grew longer, twisting into shapes that seemed almost human. Gaunt faces pressed against the bark, silent screams frozen on their lips. A sudden chill swept over them, and Clara felt the hairs on the back of her neck rise. We need to do this fast, Elias said. or the pines will decide for themselves. Clara looked around. What do we need to do? Elias drew a small, ancient knife from his coat, its blade dull but sharp. Cut into the tree. Offer your blood. Speak the words. Mike took a step back. You're insane. Clara's hand trembled, but she took the knife. The bark was rough and cold. She pressed the blade into the bleeding wood, cutting carefully, letting her blood drip into the wound. As the blood soaked in, the voices rose, wailing and keening, then abruptly stopped. The clearing grew silent. Then, from the shadows, a guttural growl erupted. The shapes surrounding the tree began to dissolve into mist. Elias collapsed to his knees, gasping, It's done, for now. Clara looked at her hands, stained with the dark sap in her blood. We have to leave, Sarah said urgently, before it changes its mind. They turned to run, but the forest was no longer the same. The trees leaned in closer, their branches like claws reaching out. Something was watching. Section 7. The Pursuit. The moment Clara pulled her bloodied hand from the tree, an eerie stillness settled over the clearing. The whispering voices that had filled the air faded, replaced by an oppressive silence, so heavy it seemed to crush the very air. Elias, still on his knees, wiped sweat from his brow. It will hold, for now. But the pines never forget. Clara's chest heaved as she stared at the dripping wound she carved. A sick mixture of relief and dread churned inside her. We should get out of here, Sarah urged, voice shaking. Mike led the way back into the forest, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. But something was wrong. The path they had taken seemed to have vanished. The undergrowth thickened impossibly, branches snagging at their clothes, roots twisting like serpents underfoot. Where's the trail? Mike muttered. Suddenly, a guttural growl rumbled behind them. The friends froze. Did you hear that? Sarah whispered, clutching Clara's arm. Out of the darkness, two glowing eyes blinked before vanishing again. Shadows moved between the trees, circling. We're being hunted, Elias said, struggling to his feet. They've marked us. Clara's heart pounded wildly as they picked up their pace, pushing through the thick underbrush. The forest around them seemed to breathe, twisting and warping, disorienting their senses. Branches snagged their faces, leaves tore at their skin, and an unbearable chill seeped into their bones. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. Snapping twigs, guttural snarls, the crunch of heavy footsteps. Mike stumbled, falling hard against the forest floor. Clara grabbed his arm, pulling him up, but the noise was closing fast. Suddenly, a monstrous figure emerged from the shadows, tall and twisted, its limbs unnaturally long, eyes glowing with malevolent light. Run! Elias shouted. They sprinted blindly, adrenaline blurring pain and fear. The forest seemed endless, but Clara's mind searched desperately for any landmark. Ahead, a faint light flickered. A cabin? Their salvation? They burst into a small clearing. The old, abandoned cabin stood crooked and weathered, windows shattered, door hanging open. No time to hesitate, Clara yelled, pushing the door wide. Inside, dust and decay greeted them. But safety was better than the forest's grasp. They slammed the door shut and barred it with a broken chair. Outside, the growls circled, growing in fury. We can't stay here, Mike said, breathless. They'll break in. Elias leaned against the wall, eyes closed. The pines want more than just our fear. They want us to become part of them. A sudden scratching came from the roof. Clara's blood ran cold. Section 8. Trapped inside. The scratching above them was slow at first, a deliberate, maddening tap that echoed through the silent cabin. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs as she pressed her back against the cold wooden wall. Mike gripped the broken chair like a shield, eyes wide in panic. Sarah crouched in the corner, trembling. "Is it trying to get in?" Sarah whispered, voice cracking. Elias opened his eyes slowly. "The pines are clever. They'll use anything, shadows, sounds, to wear you down." The tapping grew louder, now joined by low, guttural growls that seemed to reverberate from the very walls. Clara peered up at the ceiling, flashlight shaking in her hand. The wooden beams creaked, and something heavy shifted overhead. Suddenly, a deafening crack split the air as the ceiling panel above the cabin's center snapped, and a clawed hand shot through the gap, grasping blindly. "Move back!" Clara yelled, shoving Mike and Sarah away just as the hand slammed down, scraping the floorboards. Mike lunged, swinging the chair. The creature hissed, retracting its limb, but the threat was clear. Elias struggled to his feet. "We have to keep it from breaking in. Barricade every entrance." They scrambled to pile furniture and debris against the door and windows. The cabin groaned under the assault of unseen forces pressing in from outside. Clara's mind raced. They couldn't stay here forever. The forest was alive, feeding on their fear, and whatever waited in the shadows was relentless. Suddenly, the fire flickered violently and went out, plunging them into total darkness. Flashlights. Mike hissed. They fumbled in the dark, beams cutting through the blackness, revealing the cabin's warped walls and the splintered furniture barricading the door. The scratching turned into frantic clawing. From the corner, a faint whisper floated. "Join us." Clara's skin crawled. She grabbed Sarah's hand tightly. "We have to find another way out," she said, voice trembling. Elias nodded. "The back wall. There's an old cellar hatch. If we can reach it, maybe we can escape beneath the pines." Mike looked skeptical but followed Clara toward the far corner of the room. As they moved, the cabin seemed to shift, walls bending, shadows twisting unnaturally. Reaching the hatch, Clara pulled the rusted latch. It groaned, revealing a narrow staircase plunging into darkness. "Go," Elias urged. "I'll hold him off." "No," Clara protested, but Elias shook his head. "You must survive. The curse, it's not just here. It spreads." One by one, they descended into the blackness below, leaving behind the terrible sounds of clawing and growls above. The cellar was cold and damp, the air thick with the scent of earth and decay. As they reached the bottom, the hatch slammed shut with a thunderous bang. They were trapped. Section 9. The Cellar's Secrets. The darkness beneath the cabin was absolute, swallowing the weak flashlight beams like hungry shadows. The damp air clung to Clara's skin, cold and thick, smelling of earth and something far fouler beneath. Sarah gasped, clutching her arm. "What is this place?" Mike crouched low, shining his light along the rough stone walls. Old roots snaked through cracks, weaving like veins in the dirt. Elias leaned heavily against the cellar wall, eyes closed. "This cellar, it's older than the cabin itself, built to trap something deep underground." Clara swallowed, feeling a cold sweat slick her back. "Trap what?" Before Elias could answer, a faint scrape echoed from the far corner of the cellar. They froze. "What was that?" Sarah whispered. Mike swept his flashlight toward the sound, revealing a narrow doorway partially hidden behind rotting crates. Clara stepped forward, heart pounding. "There's more down there." Elias opened his eyes slowly. "The pines guard their secrets. You have seen what lies beneath." The friends exchanged uneasy glances, but knew they had no choice but to follow. The doorway creaked open, revealing a steep stairwell leading down into deeper darkness. With trembling hands, Clara led the way. The air grew colder, the silence heavier. At the bottom, the passage opened into a vast underground chamber. The walls glistened with moisture, ancient symbols carved deep into the stone. In the center stood a stone altar, stained dark and cracked, surrounded by twisted roots pulsating faintly like veins. "This must be it," Elias whispered. "The source of the curse. The heart of the pines." Suddenly, the chamber trembled, and the roots writhed like living things. A low growl echoed around them. From the shadows, glowing eyes appeared, dozens of them, watching, waiting. Clara felt a cold hand grip her shoulder. She spun around, but no one was there. "We're not alone," Mike muttered, voice shaking. Elias stepped forward, chanting softly in a language no one understood. The roots pulsed faster, light creeping along their length like blood. Clara's heart pounded as the shadows thickened, closing in. The pines had one last test, and it was coming for them. Section 10. The Heart's Test. The air in the underground chamber pulsed with a living presence, thick and suffocating. Clara's flashlight flickered as the shadows writhed around the ancient altar, roots twisting and stretching as if trying to reach them. Elias's chant grew louder, a harsh, guttural sound that seemed to echo through the stones themselves. Clara felt the words vibrating in her chest, a language old as the forest. Suddenly, the glowing eyes around them blinked in unison, and from the darkness, figures began to emerge, gaunt, twisted forms made of bark and shadow, their faces blurred but filled with silent screams. Mike gripped Clara's arm. "What are those things?" "Spirits of the pines," Elias said grimly. "Souls trapped, cursed to guard the forest's heart." One of the shadowy figures stepped forward, raising a hand. The root surged toward Clara, wrapping around her ankles, cold and unyielding. Fear seized her throat as the whispers grew louder. "Leave! Leave!" Clara struggled, heart pounding wildly. She remembered the ritual, blood, fear, life. She clenched her fist, recalling her cut on the bleeding tree. "Stay with me," Elias commanded, voice steady despite his weakness. "You must offer something, yourself or your fear." Clara closed her eyes, focusing on the warmth of her own blood, the life pulsing within her. She felt the roots tighten, but resisted their pull. "Face the pines," Elias urged. With a sudden surge, Clara stopped struggling and met the shadow's gaze, unblinking, hollow, but full of ancient sorrow. "I am not afraid," she whispered. The roots loosened, the shadows hesitated. Then, slowly, the twisted forms began to dissolve into mist, their whispers fading to silence. The chamber grew still. Elias sank to the floor, exhausted but calm. "You passed the test. The curse, it's broken, at least for now." Clara gasped, feeling the weight in her chest lift. The roots withdrew, and the chamber brightened faintly. Mike and Sarah exhaled, relief flooding them. But as they turned to leave, the altar cracked, and a soft glow emerged from its core. A single pine cone, black and shimmering with a strange light. Elias looked at it, eyes wide. "The heart of the pines, it remains." Clara took a step back, unease creeping back. "The forest is alive," Elias said quietly, "and it will always hunger." Section 11. The Escape. The soft glow from the black pinecone on the cracked altar bathed the chamber in an eerie light. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. The forest's heartbeat was far from still. Elias's gaze remained fixed on the pinecone. This power binds the curse to the land." Mike crouched, shining his flashlight over the cracked stone floor. "So what now? We leave it and hope it doesn't kill us?" Elias shook his head slowly. "No. If we walk away, the curse will spread, consume more lives, more souls." Sarah's voice trembled. "Then how do we stop it?" Elias looked weary but resolute. "We must carry the pinecone out. Destroy it, but it won't be easy. The forest will fight." Clara swallowed hard, feeling the weight of their task. She tucked the glowing pinecone into her jacket. The path back felt darker, heavier. The shadows in the chamber thickened, whispering warnings. "Move quickly," Elias urged. "The pines sense your intent." They ascended the stairwell, the air growing warmer, the sounds of the forest creeping back. When they burst through the cellar hatch, the night air hit them like a wave. But the woods had changed. The trees bit closer, their branches twisting like claws reaching for the pine cone. From the darkness, the growls erupted again, louder, more furious. Mike shouted, "Run!" Branches whipped their faces as they fled, the forest seemingly alive and hunting them. Clara's grip tightened around the pine cone, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat. Behind them, the twisted shadows emerged, reaching out with gnarled hands. "Almost there!" Elias shouted, struggling to keep pace. The cabin was a distant silhouette against the moonlight. If they could reach the road beyond, they might escape. But as they neared the clearing, the ground beneath them trembled. The pines were not done. Section 12. Secrets of the Curse. The earth shook violently beneath their feet, sending shockwaves through the forest. Clara stumbled but caught herself, heart hammering. The trees around them groaned and shifted as if awakening from a long slumber. Elias's face darkened, eyes fixed on the glowing pine cone hidden beneath Clara's jacket. "The curse isn't just nature's wrath, it's a punishment." Sarah glanced at him, breathless. "Punishment for what?" Elias paused, voice heavy with regret. "Long ago, this forest was a sacred place, protected by a tribe who lived in harmony with the pines. But greed poisoned the land. Settlers cut down the great trees, desecrated the sacred ground." Mike shook his head, disbelief etched on his face. "So the forest took revenge?" "Yes," Elias said quietly. "The pines trapped their souls, binding them to the trees. Over time, the curse grew, twisting nature and men alike." Clara's mind raced. "And you? Why are you here?" Elias's jaw tightened. "I was part of a group that tried to break the curse before. I failed. Now, I'm the last hope." A sudden rustling snapped their attention to the shadows nearby. Shapes moved, closer, faster. "We don't have much time," Elias warned. "If the pines catch us with the heart, it will consume everything." Clara glanced at the pine cone's faint glow. The power within felt overwhelming, almost alive. "We have to finish this," she said, steeling herself. "Together," Sarah agreed, gripping Clara's arm. The forest around them seemed to pulse with malevolence, the final battle approaching. Section 13. The Last Ritual. They gathered near the edge of the forest, where the trees thinned and the moonlight spilled onto cold, cracked earth. The glowing pine cone nestled carefully in Clara's jacket, its pulse syncing with the frantic beating of their hearts. Elias unfurled a faded map, marked with symbols and strange script. "The ritual must be performed where the forest's roots converge, the old clearing where the first tree was felled." Mike squinted. "We're going back in. After all this?" "No choice," Elias said grimly. "That's the only place strong enough to burn the heart and sever the curse." Sarah swallowed hard. "And if it fails?" "The forest will claim us all," Elias said quietly. Clara looked around at her friends, determination settling over her fear. "Then we make it count." They moved cautiously back into the woods, the trees closing ranks around them like watchful sentinels. Every crack of a twig, every rustle of leaves set their nerves on edge. At last, they reached the clearing, a vast space ringed by ancient oaks, roots sprawling like veins across the earth. Elias began drawing symbols in the dirt, chanting the incantation that had been passed down through generations. Clara took the pine cone in both hands, its glow growing stronger, warmth spreading through her fingers. As the chant rose, the ground beneath them shuddered, roots twitching as if alive. Suddenly, shadows burst from the trees, twisted forms with glowing eyes and clawed hands. "Protect the ritual!" Elias shouted. Mike and Sarah fought back, holding off the creatures while Clara and Elias continued the chant. The pinecone flared, sending a beam of light into the sky. The forest screamed, a sound both mournful and furious. Clara felt the power surge through her, a searing heat that threatened to consume her. But with one final cry, the pinecone shattered. Silence fell. The shadows dissolved. The forest exhaled. Section 14. The Forest's Wrath. The shattered pinecone lay in ashes at Clara's feet, its eerie glow extinguished. The clearing was still, too still. The friends gasped, lungs burning from the struggle, eyes scanning the dark treeline for any sign of movement. For a moment, it seemed the forest had yielded. But then, from the shadows, a deep, guttural roar shattered the silence, a sound like the cracking of ancient timber mixed with a beast's fury. From between the trees emerged a colossal figure, towering and grotesque, made of bark, roots, and tangled vines, its face a hollow mask of twisted wood and glowing eyes. "The Guardian," Elias whispered, barely audible. The creature's massive limbs slammed the ground, sending tremors through the clearing. It growled, a low rumble filled with rage and sorrow. Clara felt frozen, but Elias stepped forward, chanting again, raising his hands to shield them. "This spirit was bound to protect the forest, to punish those who dare destroy it," Elias said urgently. "But it can be calmed." The Guardian advanced, its eyes blazing. Suddenly, the chanting grew louder, echoing through the clearing. Clara stepped forward, heart pounding. She raised her hands, offering her blood-stained handkerchief, a symbol of respect and sacrifice. The creature paused, a flicker of recognition passing through its eyes. Slowly, it lowered its limbs and retreated into the darkness, leaving behind an uneasy calm. "We did it," Sarah breathed, relief washing over her. But Elias shook his head. "The curse may be broken, but the forest will always remember." The pines whispered in the wind, a haunting lullaby that promised the wood's restless watch would never end. Section 15. The Aftermath. The first light of dawn pierced the thinning trees as Clara, Mike, Sarah, and Elias stumbled out of the forest. Exhausted, their bodies ached, but the oppressive weight that had hung over them since arriving at Hollow Pines had lifted, at least for now. They paused at the edge of the woods, casting one last glance back at the towering trees silhouetted against the morning sky. The forest seemed quieter, almost peaceful. Clara pulled her jacket tighter, fingers brushing the empty pocket where the pinecone once burned with a strange light. "So it's really over?" Sarah asked, voice still shaky. Elias shook his head slowly. "No curse can be truly destroyed. The forest lives in cycles, growth and decay, death and rebirth. We only delayed the inevitable." Mike exhaled, trying to shake the cold that wasn't just from the night. "Then what now? Do we tell anyone?" Clara looked at her friends, their faces etched with fear and determination. "Some things are better left untold. The pines are a warning. Respect it, and maybe it won't come back." As they turned toward the road, a distant rustle echoed through the leaves. A soft whisper floated on the wind, barely audible but unmistakable. "We are watching." Clara's eyes flickered toward the forest's edge, a shiver tracing down her spine. The pines were still alive, and they would never forget. Thank you for listening. Podcast. Please like and subscribe the channel.